Commander Vexel of the Galactic Survey Corps had what most species would generously call a face, though it looked more like someone had taken a perfectly reasonable octopus and taught it to wear military insignia. His tentacles drummed impatiently against the briefing table as he reviewed the mission parameters for the third time, each reading making his chromatophores flash a deeper shade of bureaucratic irritation. "So let me understand this correctly," he gurgled to his science officer, a crystalline being whose name was Quinara, but who always insisted people pronounce it with the proper harmonic resonance that made nearby equipment short out. "High Command wants us to retrieve dilithium crystals from Vorthak Prime, a planet so aggressively hostile that our last 3 survey teams were dissolved before they could even send a distress signal." Quinara's prismatic form chimed with roughly translated to smug agreement. "Correct, Commander. The planet's ecosystem produces an airborne acid that can eat through Class A environmental suits in under 6 minutes. The native flora secretes neurotoxins that cause immediate paralysis in 97% of known species, and the fauna—" She paused for effect, her crystal facets refracting light in patterns that suggested barely contained glee. "Well, let's just say our xenobiology department classified them as aggressively carnivorous with sadistic tendencies." "Wonderful," Vextal muttered, his tentacles now doing that nervous writhing thing that always happened when High Command handed him another impossible mission. "And they expect us to somehow succeed where 3 previous expeditions failed spectacularly." "Actually, sir," Quindara chimed with what could only be described as malicious joy, "they expect us to send someone expendable." Both aliens turned to look through the briefing room's transparent aluminum viewport, where their human crew member Marcus was currently doing something that defied several laws of physics while hanging upside down from a maintenance shaft, apparently fixing a plasma conduit with nothing but enthusiasm and a multi-tool that had definitely seen better decades. Marcus Chen was the kind of human that made other species question their understanding of natural selection. He had arrived on their ship 6 months ago as part of the Galactic Council's cultural exchange program, which everyone knew was really the dump your problems on someone else program. He was cheerful to the point of being medically concerning, treated every potentially lethal situation as a minor inconvenience, and had the disturbing habit of referring to Class 5 biohazards as spicy. "Perfect," Vextal said, his voice carrying that special tone reserved for solutions that were probably war crimes but technically fell within regulations. "Brief the human. Tell him it's a standard survey mission." "Should we mention the part about the previous teams being liquefied?" Quindara asked, though her harmonic pattern suggested she already knew the answer. "Why complicate things?" Vextal replied, already composing his post-mission report in his head. "It would be beautifully tragic. The brave human volunteer lost in service to the Galactic Council. Very heroic, very final, very convenient." Marcus chose that moment to drop down from the ceiling shaft, landing with the kind of casual grace that suggested humans had evolved specifically to give other species anxiety disorders. "Hey guys," he said with that terrifying human smile. "Heard you needed someone for a field mission. When do we leave?" The next morning, Vextal watched with barely concealed satisfaction as Quinara presented Marcus with what represented the pinnacle of Galactic Survey Corps' survival technology. The environmental suit alone cost more than most starships, and could theoretically protect its wearer from everything short of a direct supernova blast. The emergency beacon could punch through subspace interference to call for help from 3 sectors away. The portable shelter could withstand a nuclear bombardment while maintaining a comfortable interior temperature and serving tea. "This is the Mark 7th Hazard Response System," Quinara explained, her crystalline form practically vibrating with the joy of watching someone walk toward their doom. "The suit's biomonitors will track your vital signs, the heads-up display will identify threats and toxicity levels, and the emergency protocols are fully automated. Simply put, this equipment represents our most advanced life preservation technology." Marcus nodded thoughtfully as he examined the gleaming, obviously expensive gear. "This is really nice," he said, running his fingers over the suit's sensor arrays. "Must have cost a fortune." "Indeed," Vextal interjected smoothly. "We spare no expense for the safety of our crew members." The lie rolled off his tentacles so easily that he almost believed it himself. "Great," Marcus said with that horrifying human enthusiasm. "I'll just go grab my stuff and we can get started." 20 minutes later, Marcus returned to the shuttle bay, carrying what appeared to be a hiking backpack that had seen better decades, possibly better centuries. It was the kind of battered, practical gear that suggested its owner had survived situations that would have required grief counselors for most species. "Ready to go," he announced cheerfully, shouldering the pack like he was heading out for a pleasant afternoon stroll. Vextal stared. "Where is your equipment?" "Right here," Marcus said, patting his backpack. "Got everything I need." "The environmental suit?" "Oh, that's really generous, but I don't want to risk damaging something that expensive." Marcus pulled out what looked like a standard-issue emergency respirator and some kind of human camping gear. "I've got my own stuff." Quinara's harmonic frequencies spiked into ranges that made nearby electronics whine in protest. That equipment is not rated for a Class X deathworld environment. "Deathworld?" Marcus looked genuinely puzzled. The mission brief just said challenging surface conditions and diverse local ecosystem. Sounds like fun. The two aliens exchanged a look that would have been meaningful if either of them had possessed what humans would recognize as facial expressions. This was going even better than they had hoped. Not only was the human walking directly into certain death, he was doing it with the kind of cheerful ignorance that would make the eventual report practically write itself. "Well," Vextal said, his voice carefully neutral, "if you're certain you have everything you need." "Absolutely," Marcus said, then paused thoughtfully. "Oh, hey, before I forget, anyone want me to bring back souvenirs? I mean, if there's anything interesting down there." The question hung in the air like a bad omen. Quinara's crystals actually stopped chiming for a moment, which was the equivalent of stunned silence. "Souvenirs," Vextal repeated slowly. "Yeah, local crafts, interesting rocks, maybe some of that local flora if it's not too weird. I always like to bring something back for the crew when I travel." Both aliens stared at the human who was treating a suicide mission to a planet that dissolved survey teams as a tourist opportunity. Just focus on the mission objectives," Vextal managed. "You got it, boss." Marcus headed toward the shuttle with that bouncing human gait that suggested he was looking forward to this. "See you guys in a few days." As the shuttle bay doors closed behind him, Vextal and Quingara stood in the kind of silence that usually preceded either enlightenment or complete psychological breakdown. "He asked about souvenirs?" Quindara finally chimed. "Yes," Vextal agreed. "He did." The shuttle had barely cleared the ship's docking bay before Commander Vextal was already mentally redecorating Marcus's quarters. The human had kept the space irritatingly tidy, but it had excellent ventilation and a viewport with a prime view of the nebula they'd be passing next week. Perfect for Vextal's collection of bioluminescent fungi, assuming he could get them to stop screaming every time someone walked by. "I call dibs on his entertainment console," Quinara announced, her crystalline form practically humming with satisfaction. "Do you know how long I've wanted to run proper harmonic analysis without worrying about human eardrums rupturing?" Vextal's tentacles writhed in what passed for a smile among his species. "Reasonable. I'll take his food synthesizer. Mine's been producing everything with an undertone of sulfur since that incident in the engine room." They stood there for a moment, savoring the sweet satisfaction of a problem solving itself. 6 months of dealing with Marcus's aggressive cheerfulness, his disturbing habit of treating emergency situations as mild inconveniences, and his complete inability to recognize when things were trying to kill him. All of it about to become nothing more than an unpleasant memory and a very sad report to Galactic Command. "Should we start the paperwork now?" Quinara asked, her harmonic frequencies taking on the musical quality she only achieved when contemplating bureaucratic efficiency. "Excellent thinking," Vextal agreed, already moving toward his ready room. "Draft the initial casualty report. Make it appropriately heroic, something about how he bravely volunteered for a dangerous mission in service to galactic science." Over the next several hours, their quarters filled with the comfortable sounds of productive administrative work, Quinara composed a beautiful tragedy about humanity's noble sacrifice for the greater good of interspecies cooperation. Vextal crafted a technical analysis of how even their most advanced equipment couldn't overcome the impossible challenges of Vorthak Prime. Together, they created a masterpiece of official documentation that would probably win awards for its touching portrayal of brave stupidity in the face of certain death. By day 2, they had divided up Marcus's belongings with the kind of methodical precision that would have impressed a team of professional estate liquidators. His collection of what he called emergency snacks went to the break room, after careful chemical analysis revealed they were somehow both nutritionally complete and absolutely terrifying from a molecular standpoint. His various tools and gadgets were distributed among the engineering staff, who were fascinated by devices that seemed to work through sheer stubborn determination rather than any identifiable scientific principle. "You know," Vextal mused on day 3 as he enjoyed his first sulfur-free meal in months, "I'm starting to remember why I joined the Survey Corps in the first place. The quiet contemplation of the universe, the peaceful pursuit of scientific knowledge. The blessed absence of someone cheerfully volunteering to wrestle hostile alien fauna. Quinara's agreement came in harmonics that made the dining hall's crystal glasses ring like tiny bells. I had forgotten what it was like to run a full spectral analysis without someone asking if the deadly radiation looked kinda pretty, and whether they could take a picture. By day 4, they had settled into a comfortable routine of Marcus-free existence. Vextal caught up on his xenobotany research without worrying that someone might try to pet the specimens. Quinara ran her harmonic experiments at full volume without concern for organic eardrums. The rest of the crew went about their duties with the relaxed efficiency of beings who no longer expected their daily routines to be interrupted by cheerful reports of someone befriending the ship's defensive systems. It was, Vextal reflected as he settled down for his first truly peaceful sleep cycle in months, exactly the kind of quiet, professional environment that made for productive scientific exploration. No more wondering what impossible thing the human had survived today. No more trying to explain why certain things were dangerous when the human clearly operated under some alternate understanding of physics. Just blessed, ordinary, completely predictable peace. The communication system chose that moment to crackle to life with a transmission from the planet's surface. Hey guys, this is Marcus, ready for pickup whenever it's convenient. Hope you don't mind, but I'm bringing back a few things. In the sudden, horrible silence that followed, Vextal could actually hear his carefully constructed reality crumbling like a house of cards in a hurricane. The first thing that went wrong with Vextal's carefully ordered universe was the transmission itself. According to every scientific model, atmospheric analysis, and previous expedition report, nothing electronic should have functioned on Vorthok Prime's surface for more than 17 minutes before the ambient acid levels corroded the circuitry into expensive slag. Marcus had been down there for 4 days. The second thing that went wrong was Marcus's voice, which came through the comm system with the kind of casual cheerfulness usually reserved for people calling to confirm dinner reservations, not survivors of what should have been a gruesome death on a planet that ate starships for breakfast. Marcus! Vextal's tentacles were doing that uncontrollable writhing thing again, but this time it was less nervous anticipation and more existential horror. You're alive? Well, yeah, obviously, Marcus replied, and Vextal could practically hear the human's confused expression through the static. Why wouldn't I be? Though I gotta say, you guys weren't kidding about the local wildlife being energetic. Had a few minor disagreements with some of the larger specimens, but we worked things out. Quinara's crystalline form was cycling through harmonic frequencies so rapidly that she sounded like a malfunctioning orchestra. Disagreements? With the apex predators? Oh, those big lizard things? Yeah, they're actually pretty reasonable once you establish proper boundaries. Took a while to figure out their social hierarchy, but we're good now. Actually, that's part of what I wanted to ask about. What's our ship's policy on pets? The question hung in the recycled air of the command deck like a toxic gas leak. Both aliens stared at the communication panel as if it had suddenly started speaking in ancient Vulcan death curses. Pets, Vexal repeated slowly, the word tasting like defeat and administrative nightmares. Yeah, I mean, I know some ships have regulations about bringing back local fauna, but these guys have been really helpful and I'd hate to just abandon them here. They followed me around for 3 days. I think they've kind of adopted me, or maybe I adopted them. Hard to tell with intraspecies relationships, you know? Quinara managed to achieve a harmonic frequency that roughly translated to, "What fresh hell is this?" while simultaneously running rapid calculations on her internal processors. According to their xenobiology database, the apex predators of Vorthok Prime were roughly the size of small shuttlecraft, possessed claws that could shred battle armor, and had acid for saliva. The idea of them adopting anything other than new and creative ways to kill prey was so far outside established scientific understanding that her logic circuits were threatening to file a formal complaint. Marcus, Vextal said carefully, when you say the local fauna has adopted you, could you be more specific about exactly what we're talking about here? Oh, just 3 of the big ones. They're actually pretty sweet once you get to know them. Been helping me carry stuff too. Turns out they're great for hauling those crystal formations you wanted. Speaking of which, mission accomplished. Got way more of those dilithium crystals than the requisition called for. And some other interesting samples. Hope you brought extra storage space. Both aliens looked at each other in the way that beings do when they realize their understanding of reality has been fundamentally challenged by forces beyond their comprehension. Vextal's tentacles had moved beyond nervous writhing into what could only be described as interpretive dance, expressing cosmic despair. How much extra? Quingara managed to chime in. Well, let's see. There was a pause, during which they could hear what sounded suspiciously like massive claws clicking against stone. I'd estimate about 3 times what you asked for in crystals. Plus, I found some really interesting mineral formations that I thought your geology department might want to look at. And there are some plants here with fascinating chemical properties. Already did some preliminary analysis with my field kit. Oh, and I collected some local soil samples, atmospheric readings, and behavioral observation data on about 15 different species. Vexel felt something that might have been a stroke beginning to develop in whatever passed for his cardiovascular system. You've been conducting scientific research? Just basic field work, Marcus replied with that horrifying human modesty. Figured, since I was here anyway, might as well make it count. The ecosystem here is really remarkable, once you get past all the things trying to dissolve you. Adaptation strategies are incredible. The predator-prey relationships alone could keep your xenobiology team busy for years. The things trying to dissolve you, Quinara repeated faintly. Oh yeah, the acid fog in the lower valleys is pretty aggressive, but it's easy enough to avoid once you map the air current patterns. And the plant toxins are actually not that bad if you know which ones to watch out for. I've got a whole botanical survey mapped out. Turns out most of the really dangerous stuff is concentrated in specific microenvironments. It's like the whole planet has natural safety zones if you know where to look. There was another pause, filled with the sound of what Vextal was beginning to suspect was a pack of planet-killing predators making happy animal noises. Anyway, Marcus continued, I should probably head back up soon. These guys are getting restless, and I promised them they could see the ship. They've never been in space before. I think they're excited. The communication panel fell silent except for static and the distant sound of what might have been the universe's most dangerous creatures playfully wrestling over who got to be closest to their new human friend. He's bringing them back, Quingara whispered, her harmonic patterns reduced to something that sounded like a funeral dirge. He's bringing the apex predators back to our ship. Vextal's tentacles had given up writhing and had instead formed themselves into what appeared to be a protective knot around his head. Send the shuttle, he said finally. And maybe clear out Cargo Bay 3, all of it. Should we alert the medical bay? Quindara asked. Alert everyone, Vextal replied, his voice carrying the weight of impending doom. And somebody find our insurance policy. I have a feeling we're going to need it. The shuttle bay had been cleared of everything except essential personnel, emergency medical equipment, and what Vextal privately considered to be his last will and testament, hastily scribbled on a datapad. The massive cargo doors slid open to reveal Marcus's shuttle touching down with the gentle precision of a leaf settling on still water, which was already suspicious because nothing involving Marcus had ever been gentle or precise. What emerged from the shuttle's cargo hold redefined several scientific understanding of the word impossible. Marcus stepped out first, still wearing his battered camping gear and that insufferably cheerful expression, looking like someone returning from a pleasant weekend in the mountains, rather than a 4-day survival scenario on a planet that had previously been classified as uninhabitable by any known form of life. Behind him came approximately 3 tons of carefully organized geological samples, botanical specimens in proper containment fields, and enough dilithium crystals to power a battle cruiser. Behind that came the pets. The first one to emerge was roughly the size of a small hover car, covered in scales that shifted color from deep purple to iridescent gold depending on the light. Its head was vaguely reptilian, if reptiles had evolved specifically to give nightmares to entire civilizations, and its claws were currently retracted, but obviously capable of opening starship hulls like particularly stubborn food containers. It looked around the shuttle bay with intelligent yellow eyes, made a sound that was part purr and part earthquake, and then settled down next to Marcus like a dog waiting for its next command. The second predator was smaller but somehow more disturbing, with 6 legs and what appeared to be natural camouflage that kept making Vextal's eyes water when he tried to focus on it directly. It had tentacles of its own, which it used to carefully arrange Marcus's equipment while making happy, chirping sounds that would have been adorable if they weren't coming from something that could apparently dissolve titanium with its saliva. The third one defied classification entirely. It looked like someone had crossed a panther with a praying mantis and then given the result a degree in advanced chemistry. Its compound eyes tracked every movement in the shuttle bay, while its 4 arms delicately manipulated what appeared to be a collection of local flowers, which it had apparently been carrying for Marcus during the return journey. Everyone, meet Rex, Spot, and Princess, Marcus announced, with the kind of casual pride usually reserved for introducing beloved family pets rather than apex predators that had probably eaten the previous survey teams. They're the ones I was telling you about. Really smart, too. Watch this. Hip. He turned to the largest predator and made a series of hand gestures that looked suspiciously like sign language. The creature responded with a complex pattern of color changes across its scales, and a series of low, harmonic sounds that made Quinara's crystalline form resonate sympathetically. Rex here was actually the first one to approach me, Marcus explained while casually scratching behind what might charitably be called the creature's ears. Turns out the aggressive behavior previous teams reported was mostly territorial posturing. Once I demonstrated that I wasn't there to compete for resources or threaten their nesting grounds, they got curious instead of hostile. Vextal's tentacles had formed themselves into what appeared to be a defensive knot. You communicated with them? Well, not at first, Marcus admitted. There was definitely some initial confusion. Rex here tried to eat me on day one, but that was mostly a misunderstanding about boundaries. Once I established that I could defend myself without being a threat to the pack, things got a lot friendlier. Defend yourself, Quinara chimed faintly, against a predator whose jaw strength is rated at 12,000 pounds per square inch. Marcus shrugged with that terrifying human casualness. Judo works pretty much the same everywhere. Leverage is leverage, you know? Plus, once I figured out their communication patterns, I could explain that I was just visiting and wasn't interested in challenging pack hierarchy. He gestured to Spot, the six-legged nightmare with the camouflage abilities, who was currently investigating a maintenance panel, with the kind of systematic thoroughness that suggested intelligence that was probably classified. Spot's the curious one, kept following me around asking questions. Well, what I assume were questions based on vocal patterns and body language. Turns out they have a pretty sophisticated understanding of chemistry. Made the sample collection way easier once Spot started helping identify which plants were actually dangerous versus just looked scary. Princess, the mantis-panther hybrid, made a sound like crystalline wind chimes and delicately placed the collection of flowers near Quinara's feet before settling into what was obviously a respectful waiting posture. Princess is the diplomatic one, Marcus continued. Once the pack accepted me, Princess took over formal introductions to the rest of the local ecosystem. That's how I managed to map out the safe zones so quickly. Princess knew where everything was and which areas to avoid during different times of day. Bextel stared at the scene unfolding in his shuttle bay. Three creatures that should have been dissolving everything they touched were instead carefully organizing scientific samples and, apparently, attempting to make polite conversation with his crew. Marcus, he said slowly, how exactly did you establish that you could defend yourself against a pack of apex predators? Marcus looked slightly embarrassed, which was somehow more terrifying than his usual confidence. Well, that's where things got a little complicated. See, Rex's first approach was pretty aggressive, lots of roaring and claw display, typical dominance behavior, so I did what seemed natural and roared back. You roared back, Quinara repeated in harmonics that suggested her logical processes were filing for early retirement. Yeah, and apparently I'm pretty good at it because Rex immediately switched to what I now know was a play challenge posture instead of actual aggression. Turns out humans can produce some sounds that register as impressive in their social structure. We ended up in what I guess you'd call a friendly wrestling match. The implications of this statement hung in the recycled air like a toxic cloud. Marcus had engaged in physical combat with a creature that could theoretically bite through starship armor, and somehow convinced it that this was a friendly social interaction. The wrestling match lasted about 10 minutes, Marcus continued cheerfully, and I think I held my own pretty well considering. Rex seemed genuinely impressed that I could grapple without trying to go for kill strikes, and after that, the whole pack treated me like a potential pack member rather than prey or threat. Rex chose that moment to make another one of those earthquake purr sounds and gently headbutt Marcus's shoulder with what was obviously affection. Marcus responded by scratching the creature's neck ridges, which caused Rex to make happy rumbling sounds that vibrated through the deck plating. But to them it was just a matter of proving I could contribute to pack welfare, Marcus explained. I helped them solve a territorial dispute with some of the other large predators in the area, shared some of my food which they found fascinating from a nutritional standpoint, and started learning their communication system. By day 3 they were actively helping with the mineral surveys. Vextal looked around his shuttle bay, taking in the sight of his crew cautiously approaching creatures that could theoretically eat the entire ship, while said creatures politely displayed their collected scientific samples and made what were obviously attempts at friendly conversation. Marcus, he said finally, you realize that what you've just described is completely impossible, according to every established principle of xenobiology, interspecies communication theory, and basic survival instinct. Marcus considered this for a moment, then shrugged with that casual human gesture that somehow managed to dismiss several centuries of scientific understanding. Yeah, But it worked out pretty well, don't you think? Plus, now you guys have the most comprehensive survey data ever collected from Vorthak Prime, and 3 new crew members who are really excited to see what the rest of the galaxy looks like. Huh. Princess made another one of those chiming sounds and delicately offered Quinara one of the flowers, which glowed with a soft bioluminescence that was undeniably beautiful and probably lethally toxic. Safe, they asked Thorpe. Maybe, Vextal asked, though he already knew the answer from the way the 3 predators had arranged themselves protectively around Marcus, and were clearly treating the shuttle bay as their new territory. Well, I told them they didn't have to, Marcus said. But Rex is really interested in seeing other planets, Spot wants to study different chemical environments, and Princess thinks interspecies diplomacy sounds like fun. They're basically scientists themselves, when you get right down to it. As if to prove his point, Spot had somehow interfaced with the shuttle bay's environmental control system, and was apparently running atmospheric analysis, while Princess appeared to be cataloging the shuttle bay's contents, and Rex was studying the artificial gravity generators with the kind of focused attention that suggested genuine scientific curiosity. Bextel realized that somewhere in the space of 10 minutes, his carefully ordered universe had been completely restructured by a human who treated impossible death worlds as interesting vacation destinations and apex predators as potential research partners. Right, he said finally, his voice carrying the weight of complete surrender to forces beyond his understanding. I'll have the quartermaster prepare 3 more crew quarters, and somebody find the xenobiology department. I think they're going to want to rewrite a few textbooks. 3 weeks into what Vextal had begun thinking of as the new nightmare, he had to admit that having 3 apex predators as crew members was working out disturbingly well. Rex had proven to have an intuitive understanding of quantum mechanics that made the physics department weep with joy. Spot had revolutionized their chemical analysis protocols by being able to taste molecular compositions, and Princess had somehow negotiated a trade agreement with a notoriously hostile species by what could only be described as aggressive politeness. The morning briefing had evolved into something that would have given Galactic Command's bureaucrats stress-induced molting. Vextal still sat at the head of the conference table, but now Rex lounged beside him like a scaly 3-toned advisor, occasionally offering insights by way of harmonic rumbles that Marcus had learned to translate with disturbing accuracy. Spot perched on a specially reinforced chair, systematically analyzing the molecular composition of everyone's morning beverages and providing helpful commentary about trace mineral content. Princess maintained a formal posture that somehow made everyone else feel underdressed while delicately arranging data pads with her 4 arms in a display of organizational efficiency that put most administrative assistants to shame. So, Vextal said, reviewing the morning reports with the resigned air of someone who had accepted that reality was more flexible than previously believed. The geological survey of the Kepler system went well? Extremely well, Quinara chimed, her harmonic patterns having adapted to include frequencies that the predators found pleasant. Rex identified 3 previously unknown mineral formations just by examining the spectral analysis data. Spot located a gas giant with atmospheric conditions perfect for rare element extraction, and Princess established diplomatic contact with the local crystalline entities. The crystalline entities that our previous surveys classified as aggressively territorial and possibly malevolent, Vextal asked, though he already knew the answer would somehow involve Marcus, treating another impossible situation as a minor social inconvenience. Turns out they were just lonely, Marcus explained cheerfully from his position, leaning against Rex's flank like the creature was an oversized carnivorous easy chair. Princess figured out their communication patterns. Apparently they've been trying to make friends for centuries, but most species interpret their greeting rituals as attack patterns. Once she explained proper crystalline social etiquette, they were incredibly helpful. They've offered to guide us to a system with dilithium deposits that would take our mining operations from adequate to obscenely profitable. Rex made one of his earthquake purr sounds and displayed a complex pattern of color changes across his scales. Marcus nodded seriously as if this was perfectly normal conversation. Rex says the crystalline entities also mentioned something about ancient ruins on their homeworld that might contain technology from the first civilization period, Marcus translated. Apparently they've been waiting for someone polite enough to ask permission before investigating. Vextal's tentacles performed what had become their standard morning routine of writhing in existential confusion before settling into resigned acceptance. Of course they have, and I suppose Princess volunteered us for an archaeological expedition. Princess made a series of chiming sounds that somehow managed to convey both enthusiasm and diplomatic propriety, while organizing the mission reports into neat piles with her various appendages. She says she already submitted a preliminary diplomatic proposal to both the crystalline entities and Galactic Command, Marcus translated. Full cultural exchange program, shared research initiative, the works. She's really good at paperwork, actually. Turns out apex predators have to maintain pretty detailed territorial management records. Spot chose that moment to make a series of clicks and whistles while tapping one claw against a datapad, displaying chemical composition charts. Spot wants to know if we can make a detour to investigate the anomalous readings from the nebula we're passing. Marcus continued his translation duties. Apparently, the spectral signature suggests some kind of exotic matter that might be useful for improving our sensor array efficiency. Vextall looked around his briefing room, taking in the sight of his command staff casually planning scientific expeditions with input from creatures that should have been melting through the deck plating instead of offering helpful suggestions about resource management and diplomatic protocol. Right, he said finally. Princess, coordinate with Galactic Command about the archaeological expedition. Rex, work with the physics department on those quantum calculations. Spot. He paused, realizing he was about to give mission assignments to a creature that had probably eaten his predecessor. Spot. Analyze those nebula readings and prepare a full report. All three predators made sounds that Marcus had taught them meant acknowledgement and agreement, then settled into what was obviously productive work posture. Rex began manipulating a holographic display showing complex mathematical equations. Spot started cross-referencing chemical data with their sensor readings, and Princess activated her personal communication system to begin drafting diplomatic correspondence. You know, Quinara chimed privately to Vextall, our efficiency ratings have improved by 300% since they joined the crew. Yes, Vextall agreed, watching Rex solve a quantum mechanics problem that had stumped their best scientists for months. That's what worries me. Marcus looked up from where he was helping Princess organize some kind of interspecies cultural sensitivity training manual. Oh, that reminds me, he said with that casual tone that had become the harbinger of impossible things. I was thinking about taking some shore leave when we reach the Vega system next month. Both aliens turned to stare at him with the kind of focused attention usually reserved for incoming disasters. Shore leave, Vextall repeated carefully. Yeah. I heard there's this really interesting planet in that system. Vega 7, I think. Supposed to have some unique geological formations and fascinating atmospheric conditions. Thought it might be fun to do some hiking, maybe some basic survey work. Quintara's harmonic frequencies spiked into the range that made nearby electronics whine in protest. Marcus, she chimed slowly, Vega 7 is classified as a Class X restricted zone. The entire planet is essentially one massive volcano, with an atmosphere composed of superheated toxic gas and acid rain. Sounds challenging, Marcus agreed cheerfully. That's what makes it interesting, right? Rex made an inquiring rumble and displayed questioning color patterns across his scales. Marcus turned to him with that terrifying human smile. Want to come along? I bet you guys have never seen a proper volcanic ecosystem. All three predators immediately perked up with obvious interest, making sounds that clearly translated to enthusiastic agreement. Princess began what appeared to be preliminary vacation planning. Spot started analyzing atmospheric data for the target planet, and Rex rumbled with what was obviously excitement about the prospect of exploring somewhere new and dangerous. Vextall watched this exchange with the dawning horror of someone who realized that his ship was now crewed by beings who considered deathworlds to be recreational destinations. Marcus, he said carefully, perhaps you could consider somewhere a bit more survivable. For your shore leave? Marcus looked genuinely puzzled. Where's the fun in that? Besides, these guys need proper exercise, and ship life doesn't give them enough opportunities to really stretch their legs. A nice active planet sounds perfect. The princess made a series of diplomatic chiming sounds while organizing what appeared to be travel brochures for various Class X death worlds. Princess says she's already identified 3 other planets in the region that might be interesting to visit while we're in the area, Marcus translated helpfully. Apparently there's one with a methane ocean and another with gravitational anomalies that create floating islands. She thinks it would be educational. Vextall felt that familiar sensation that indicated his reality was once again being reconstructed by forces beyond his comprehension. Educational, he repeated weakly. Oh, and she wanted to know if anyone else wants to come along, Marcus continued. She's thinking of putting together a proper expedition team. You know, make it a real scientific survey instead of just a vacation. Rex and Spot both made enthusiastic sounds that clearly indicated their willingness to turn Marcus's shore leave into a full-scale exploration of the most dangerous planets in the sector. Vextall looked around his briefing room one more time, taking in the sight of 3 apex predators, enthusiastically planning what would probably become known as the most unnecessarily hazardous shore leave in Galactic Survey Corps history, while his human crew member treated it like any other weekend trip. I'll start working on the insurance paperwork, he said finally. Great, Marcus said, then turned to his 3 companions. Hey, do any of you guys know if superheated volcanic ash is bad for human skin? I want to make sure I pack the right sunscreen. As the 3 predators began what was obviously a detailed discussion about protective measures for extreme environmental exposure, Vextol quietly updated his personal log with a single entry. Note to self. Request transfer to nice, quiet desk job, preferably in a different galaxy. Outside the viewport, the stars wheeled by in their ancient patterns, completely unaware that somewhere among them, humanity had just redefined what it meant to be the most terrifyingly adaptable species in the known universe. And they were bringing friends.